Hey there everybody, Brandon here coming to you out of my gallery, and so I have a walkthrough video for you this time on my process of painting the child, aka Baby Yoda from the Disney series The Mandalorian. If you're unfamiliar with that, maybe you've been a little bit out of touch with some of the popular TV shows and merchandise going on these days, because Baby Yoda is pretty much everywhere if you look at store shelves and that stuff. But just a little backstory. So my family and I have always been, I guess you could say, some Star Wars fans in terms of just the movies. My wife has always kind of attached herself to Yoda. It's been her favorite character. So she's got a lot of Yoda paraphernalia at the house. And so when Baby Yoda arrived on the scene, she naturally latched onto that one. So I actually painted this for her birthday this year, and I had painted some previous Star Wars stuff here for my gallery. You'll notice up there I've got an R2-D2 and the original Yoda, a BB-8, and a couple of scenes from the original movie there. So I've had a few Star Wars items here at the shop for a while, so naturally I just felt like I was going to paint this one for my wife for her birthday present this year. And so if you want to follow along and see my process of getting this little guy painted, let's go have a look. Alright, for this project I started with a 12 by 12 canvas. So I had a squared canvas this time. I thought that would work pretty good, plus I already had a frame for this particular canvas here, so I was going to use this again for my wife's birthday present this year. And I coated this canvas just with a thinned out mixture of burnt sienna to give it that tone, and then I sketched in my little loose sketch here of the Baby Yoda figure. And so I'm starting here in the foreground, and what I was going for here, I'm working off of a source photo from the Disney series here, so I can get this little fella looking the way that I want, hopefully. And he's standing kind of in a dirt road looking thing, maybe with some kind of little village in the background. So I'm going for that kind of scene here. And really it's just about me starting in the foreground, putting in some of my darker shadowed tones to start out with, and then taking the saturation down as I move away from it. I was trying to communicate some kind of a dirt road that he was standing on, and then a background of some kind of little village maybe, with some trees back there with it. And the real key for me on the background is just trying to keep all of my lines fairly soft and not have a lot of real sharp edges back there. I wanted it to appear a little bit out of focus in the background. That way the foreground image of the Baby Yoda here would pop against it, and it would set the painting off really well. And I intentionally left a little bit of my background color shining through in some of this background, just to kind of give it an inherent kind of a glow in some areas. So I ran some thin paint in some areas that I didn't cover it up entirely, and I just did that on purpose. Didn't have any real plan for the background other than that, so I just basically used a lot of earth tones in this background and kept that with the overall theme of the painting. In an attempt to make it appear that as the things came forward, they started to become a little bit more in focus, I have a little bit sharper lines right at the bottom of the canvas here for my background, with a little bit brighter highlights and darker darks along with those sharper edges, just to give that illusion again that it's starting to come a little more in focus. And now starting on the Baby Yoda himself, basically just putting in some of the darker toned areas first, getting those in place, and then working from there. And in the process of just creating the colors in the right places, and then adjusting them as I needed to as I work with the shaded values and going from darker to light in areas and creating that back and forth until I get the contrast the way I want and get the image looking the way I want it. I'm using a 3/4 inch wash brush for almost all of this blocking in layer, and then I switched to a couple of different brushes to do some of the detailing and finer work once I get the blocking in layer done. But this initial blocking in layer, I'm not worried if I've got the correct color exact that I want at this point. I'm just getting in something that's close to that color and then trying to be mindful of the contrasting lights and darks being in the right places. That way when I go back to adjust it, it's a little bit easier. I was also working with the idea that there is a light source coming in from the right side of this painting, so the right side of the face and the arm and shoulder, and kind of from the top edge as well, from the right side is where I'm going to be focusing my brightest highlights. I wanted to make sure that I got the eyes right on this particular painting because, I mean, that is probably the biggest prominent feature on this little guy is his big eyeballs there. So I wanted to make sure that I got those things as close to accurate as possible. Yeah, he's got some big ears out there too, but if you don't get the eyes right, it probably will make the whole thing look wrong. So I wanted to make sure that I communicated those as best as I could. And I'm adjusting my browns a little bit here on his little cloak or whatever he's got going on here that he's wearing. Basically just putting some darker brown in, that way I can put the lighter texturing over top of it. So you just see me working that with my wash brush, still getting those colors in the right places. Now I wanted to put this little, he's got like a sphere that he holds onto a lot, which is really just the head of like a shifter knob that's out of the spaceship that he kind of swiped it off the Mandalorian's thing and plays with a lot in the series. So I did want to put that in his hand there, create a little chrome shifter ball that he's hanging onto in this image. I have moved over to a smaller angled brush here to start working some of the details in on the clothing, and then to finish off the texture for it, I have moved to a 1/2 inch. It's like a rake brush, I guess they call it, where it's got gaps in the bristles on it, and so I'm using that to put in this kind of fuzzy fleece looking texture that's on the outside of this clothing. And again, I'm trying to put the brightest highlights here on the right edges of everything. So you see me shading mostly these right edges of where it would be catching the most light with my brightest highlights. Now I will apologize at this point for the camera focus. I'm not sure. I think that maybe my tripod had gotten bumped slightly here, so the actual image that you're looking at is not quite in focus crisply there the way I would want. You can still see what I'm doing, obviously, but it's not quite as in focus as I would have wanted it to be, so I do apologize for that. But I'm just now starting to work on getting the colors on the face right and shaping out the different little wrinkles and nuances that he has along his face and his cheeks and around his mouth. And I just kind of keep working back and forth depending on what color I have on my brush at the moment and using that in the areas that I think it needs to be in. I wanted to give him a little happier face than the source reference photo I was using. He had kind of a not so great look on his face in terms of his expression. He looked a little bit bummed out. But I didn't want to paint that, obviously, for my wife's birthday, so gave him a little bit of an upturned mouth there, and a little bit more of a smile, a little rosier on the cheek action there. So made him look a little happier, is what I was going for, and I was pretty pleased at how that turned out. And at this point, the last little thing I had to do is put all the little small kind of whitish looking hairs that he's got on his head in place. So I'm using a liner brush to accomplish that. And really, after I get a few layer passes of those hairs in place, it was just time to make sure that there wasn't any last changes I wanted to make and then call it a finished painting. And so there is my finished product of the child, otherwise known as Baby Yoda, from the Disney Plus series The Mandalorian. Hope you guys enjoyed watching along with that one. Until next time, happy painting, everybody.